Hello there. Hope everything's great today. My name is Bruce, and this, if you've been following along, is what I've been calling my classroom in the forest. I realize it's a little bit generous, but nevertheless, you can call it something. I can call it anything I want, and that's what I'm going to call it. Anyway, and if you might notice, I'm actually in the forest. First step. Second step, there's insects. The third step, I don't write a script. So that has its advantages and disadvantages. Okay, moving along. So as you may know or may not know, what I like to do is to try to do three things. The first one is I like to talk about a thing, an object. The second thing I like to do is briefly mention a person. And the last thing I like to do is talk about kind of an idea. Might get a little bit rambly, but bear with me. That's it. Now today, I'd like to talk about, as an object, I'd like to talk about something that's not an object that you might think in the traditional sense, but what it is two things. First of all, one is a lobster. Now, the reason I'm mentioning a lobster is because it's a little bit of something that's happened to me in the last few months. Is I've had a rethink of lobsters, a reconsideration of how I regard lobsters. The lobster, the Atlantic lobster, the one that you commonly find in the East Coast and you find in restaurants and such. And what prompted me to think about that is I didn't really think very much about lobsters other than I like them. But a period of months ago, someone making a video for YouTube had purchased a lobster from a grocery store, took it home, installed it into a saltwater, a proper aquarium, and doing so, they removed the rubber bands that keep the lobster's hands together, or pincers from damaging other lobsters while they're in transit or in the store or wherever, and he had the lobster in that. And then he gave it a little bit of dinner, some lobster food, I forget exactly, and lobster. And over a period of time, the lobster organized its life. So what the lobster did was, it took him a good amount of time to heal because his hands had been bound up for so long. And that's something that I kind of have some experience with because I've had a couple of broken bones in my lifetime. And I know that periods of immobility, even just staying still for a month, makes it difficult to recover. So I can empathize a little bit with the lobster there. And then it took the lobster some time to get his mobility back in his hands. And as time went on, then the lobster realized its environment and began to organize itself. He had a section of his world for eating, and he had a section of his world or her world for going to the washroom, and then he made little decorations, another world, and he organized the stones, and he made it pretty nice for himself, I must say. And what did this do? Well, it extended my empathy towards lobsters. And it made me realize that if a lobster is this concerned about his environment or its environment, then wow, maybe I've been just simply wrong about lobsters all the time along. And if I'm wrong about lobster, maybe I'm wrong about a lot of stuff. Thing number one. Then there's a part two to this. As I was driving down the road a few evenings ago, and I witnessed a crow. This crow had been struck by an automobile, and it was on the pavement, and it was having difficulty. It wasn't dead, but it was having mobility issues. It couldn't fly, it couldn't do a lot of things, but you could see that crow struggling. And then I noticed something that I thought was amazing, and I might be wrong from a zoological perspective or a study of crows perspective, or my observation may be incorrect, a lot of things. But what I did observe was there were about 12 other crows. And each of these 12 other crows, what would happen was one crow would fly down to where the injured crow was, sort of grab the crow, move it a little tiny bit, and then get tired, let go, fly away, and then another crow would come in, grab the injured crow, move a little tiny bit off the road, get tired, and another crow would come in and do this. So I'd stopped, and I was watching this for a period of time, and eventually the crows had managed to move the injured crow off the road. Now, I don't have an ending to this story, in the sense that I don't know what happened exactly to the injured crow. Did it recover? Did it fly away? Whatever. But what that did was it changed the way I regard crows. And if I've been changing the way I regard lobster and changing the way I regard crows, and what else has changed? What else has changed? The way I regard whatever. Moving along. Talking about changing in the way we regard things. Moving along. Okay. The Pope of the Catholic Church is coming to Canada. It's kind of a news story. Now, he's coming to Canada because he was begged to, asked to, exhorted to, forced to, a lot of things like this. But he's coming to Canada to apologize for the role the Catholic Church played in what's known as a Canadian residential school system that really existed up until not that long ago. And at that time, children were forcibly removed from their families and taken away to school, to a place where they were forced to live in really abhorrent conditions with people that didn't have much regard for the well-being of the child. And that idea to me it's pretty offensive and embarrassing, and it's a lot of badness in there. And remember I said at the beginning that I talk about a thing and I talk about a person. Well, the person I'm talking about it's not going to be the Pope. The person that I'm talking about is I can choose from a number of people, but I like to talk about a guy named Darren Gugu. Darren Gugu was in my grade school. I attended school with the guy, although he wasn't in my class. And I only really kind of met him after I'd finished school. And what an impressive guy! I mean, he was a leader, like through and through. I mean, he's the sort of person that you'd rally around and want to help and do things. And I had met Darren when he was being enterprising and starting a newspaper, which, wow, this guy's starting a newspaper. That was impressive, very impressive. And another person I'd like to mention briefly is Andrew Paul. And Andrew Paul, he had other names, Andrew Ghali Muhammad Paul, and he was a Mi'kmaq in my area, and I got to know him when I was a little tiny bit older after school, and he was very kind, and he would take me to his home and community, and I met many people, and geez, it was interesting to meet new people, and I was grateful for the friendship that Andrew Paul extended, and for the respect that he afforded me, and that you could see that he afforded everyone. That's a great guy, and I'd like to thank him for that, and I'd like to thank Darren Gugu. And Darren Gugu, if you happen to be watching, you know that now 40 years later, I think about you maybe periodically, once a week. I don't know, my thoughts come and go. Anyway, that's it. Now, I'm going to talk about an idea. And you might be getting a little bit antsy because the idea that I'm talking about is the same idea. It's this idea of, in economics, first of all, we talked about the concept of more and how the human quest for more is what drives our economy. And maybe I'll be backing off a little bit when I'm looking for more lobster. More, and I moved it along, and I talked about the entities that exist in society, and I talked about a thing called the production possibility function, the production possibility curve, the idea of what do we know, what do we have, what can we do, what can we make, consideration of what we have, what are our possibilities, what can we do, what exists. And within that is the recognition of what you have. So I was talking earlier about the legacy of the residential schools, which are, as I said, is a heartbreaking embarrassment. And I talked about Andrew Paul and Darren Gugu, and I wish to tie this a little bit in, is because when you don't recognize what you have, and by you, I mean, there's a lot of you here. There's you, there's me, there's a societal you. Remember I talked about the role of government, the role of the firm, the role of the individual in our economy and our society. But when you do not, a failure to recognize what you have is lost opportunity. And opportunity cost, we talked about that. And opportunity cost is the thing that you do while you're doing the thing that you're not doing, or the thing that you had to give up to have the thing that you have. Okay, so a failure to recognize the dignity and the potential and the reality and the respect and the faith and the wisdom and the cultural legacy and the cultural presence of people is an offense to this idea of the production possibility curve. And to have people in leadership who really don't know what their job is, that they can't enunciate what the task at hand is. The task at hand for people in leadership, the task at hand for government, is to maximize the well-being of society. That's the job. There's it's not unfortunate aspects, but unfortunate's the wrong word, but it's not as straightforward as you might think. And I might call this, for a brief moment, I'm in the forest, there's noises. Apologize. There's actually dynamiting going on a couple of kilometers that way. So if you hear a kaboom, it's not Marvin the Martian, it's actual kaboom. So maximize the well-being for everyone in society, I said. And that means that there's a balance of interests. Okay? Regulation, non-regulation, rules. Okay? Rules are good. I find rules to be wonderfully comfortable. I like rules, and I like it when rules exist for a valid reason, even though that reason may not be readily apparent. Oh, and about a moment ago, before I was distracted, I was going to say the wisdom of Marge Simpson. If you watch episodes of The Simpsons, there's an arc, and the arc goes like this. Springfield has a problem. The community has a solution that they think's great. Marge Simpson says, hey, wait a second, we have a different plan. They do Marge Simpson's plan, build a monorail, Then what happens is the unanticipated consequence. In their heart of hearts, they thought they were doing good. But there's a reason why it wasn't good that wasn't apparent at the beginning, that rears its head towards the end, and then everything decays into chaos and Homer has a donut. There's economic lessons in there, or there's life lessons. And the reason that I'm talking about economics is because I have a firm belief that the study of economics and the appreciation of economics and this idea of good enough. I mean, you don't have to get a doctorate. A little bit of understanding and an appreciation of economics will make your life comfortable. And by your life, I mean maybe your inner life. Okay? Anyway, so the idea today is lost opportunity. There you go. And and the opportunity that you're losing isn't necessarily readily apparent. Okay? So years